Two and a high chair for smoking. Chapter 5. The Home Stretch. Part 9. Steve Mann! Max was back. I couldn't believe it. There he was, sitting across from me in the staff room, having a smoke. It was his first day back, and he was on a break. For the most part, he looked the same. Long hair, skinny, ruddy-faced. I had been surprised when the boss let Fran come back, but that was understandable. She had a family. The boss didn't want her to lose her home. But Max? There had been genuine hostility at the end. How many years had it been? He looked thinner, weaker, and the lines on his face seemed deeper. Time had not been kind. His story jumped around a bit. I didn't try to nail him down on details. He had worked here and there before winding up manager of a bar and grill downtown. Things had been fine, he said, until the owner sold the place one day without telling him. That was the story. He looked sick. I noticed his fingers trembling when he lit a cigarette. The word unsteady came to mind. Wherever he had been, whatever he had done, it had taken a toll. And now, here he was. I'm back. The same smile, but tired now. Strained. What had he told the boss to convince him to let him come back? There must have been something. Looking at Max across the table, I realized just how hollow the greeting, "Good to see you again," could be. I wished he had stayed a memory. I liked him there. I had never felt uncomfortable around him before. Now I did. He had walked in the week before to talk with the boss. It was like seeing a ghost come up the stairs. I recognized him immediately. I had just never expected to see him again. Max said that he had an appointment after lunch. In the meantime, he wanted to get something to eat. I took him to a table and smoking. During lunch, I was cleaning a table near the gazebo. I looked up and saw him having a smoke. He looked tired, worn out, like a boxer near the end of a long fight. Jennifer, a new server on the floor, came out from the kitchen pass bar and slowly walked down the stairs, balancing several plates. Max's eyes drifted up, saw her, and locked in. Every step, every turn of her body, Max's eyes followed, transfixed. I suddenly felt pity for him. He looked so desperate and seedy. Jennifer was my age. Max was double. His stare became pronounced. Max, look away. Don't be so obvious. Come on, man. She came down the stairs and walked past me to her table. Max's eyes followed. The boss came down and joined him after the lunch rush ended. They seemed to get along. Lori and I looked at each other. I gestured toward the table. She shrugged. And now Max was back. Looking at him in the staff room, I could feel just how much we had changed. I just wasn't sure which one of us had changed more. Part 10. Things are changing again. In smoking. The boss didn't look pleased when he told us that he had some news. At first we thought the government was putting the squeeze on the number of tables in the smoking section again. But nope. The word from up on high now decreed that minors would not be allowed in smoking, even if they came with an adult. I couldn't believe it. No more 2 and a high chair for smoking. It was the end of an era. Pretty soon, we won't even have a smoking section, laughed Mel. It'll just be 4-3? No one disagreed with her. The writing was on the wall. The boss worried that fewer families would come in. And servers worried about getting fewer tips. I wasn't worried about anything. All I had to do was keep working and stick to my savings plan. And keep a sharp eye out when promoting any meals. The new bylaw did not go down well with some people. 3 for smoking. I looked at them. 2 guys and a girl, a few years younger than me. Do you have any ID? They smirked at me. Really? Yes, you assholes. Haven't you heard? A new bylaw just came into effect. One of them sneered and showed me his debit card. Sorry, do you have any photo ID? Something that has your picture and date of birth? The guy scowled, but looked a little nervous. He pulled out his driver's license. That good enough for you? Something about these pricks pissed me off. They had been hot shit in high school, no doubt about that. But not anymore. Not now. That's good. Do your friends have photo ID too? Their faces dropped. Really? What is this, a bar? Maybe this bylaw wasn't such a bad thing after all. I shrugged and pointed to the new sticker on the front counter. No minors allowed in smoking. Below the block lettering was the bylaw number and the threat of a fine. They left. I smiled. Just following orders. And still the desperate came. Can you put us at separate tables? Asked a dad who clearly relished the idea of having lunch without his children. I'm sorry, sir. We can't do that. But why not? He pleaded. We'll just sit in smoking and the kids can sit in non-smoking. We'll check on them. They'll be fine. I promise. I could see the anguish in his eyes. If he couldn't have a smoke with his kids, he wanted something even better, a smoke without them. A glance at his wife was enough to know that she felt the same. She looked familiar. I vaguely remembered her having a spiral perm in the past. That was before the second baby, one that had clearly taken its toll. You could see it in her eyes. In a perfect world, I'd say yes. I would take the kids upstairs, stash them in a booth, and then lead the parents into the back of smoking, as far away from their kids as possible. The mom and dad would smoke, hold hands, share loving glances, and enjoy a meal without their kids jumping up and down on the seats. They would leave a generous tip on both tables. In this fantasy, the kids would even be well behaved, and everyone would be happy. But real life was no fantasy. The kids would be hellions. The parents would leave a tip on their table, but leave the server that had suffered their children's insolence with nothing. Would the tip be shared? No. Bad blood would ensue. Chaos. Feuds. Word would get around town that we allowed single families to occupy 2 tables. Profits would plummet. Costs would soar. The boss would cut my hours. Promises be damned. I'd start dating the girl that worked at Roughage and buy a used car instead of going to Australia. It couldn't happen. I wouldn't allow it to happen. I'm sorry. We're not allowed to split tables like that. The dad exhaled a long, defeated sigh. All right. 4 for non-smoking. His wife's shoulders sagged. I picked up the menus and led the family upstairs. Part 11. There were 3 types of customers. The first kind were eaters you had probably never seen before, or people that came in so rarely that they might as well be first-timers. Next were the regulars. You knew them, and they ran the gamut, from nameless but familiar faces to those people that you knew so well that you could write a detailed profile. Name, table preference, tipping style, general personality traits. Sometimes you even knew about their jobs and personal lives. And then there was the third variety, People that you knew from the world outside. This was sometimes awkward. The inevitable small talk about people that you both knew and how life had been since high school. Plans for the future. You still in the mall? Yep. Mr. Ryerson belonged to that final group. He was a teacher at my old high school, but I had never taken his class. He was known as the hippie art teacher. Bushy beard, long hair, never really taught anything. He just let his students draw pictures or sneak off to get high while he played guitar in class. Sean and I sometimes saw him at the pub, reading books about things they don't want you to know about. Jesus Christ apparently had backpacked through India and Tibet. Scientists had discovered babies in remote tribes that were resistant to both malaria and HIV. The nature of quantum physics and atomic structure meant that existence as we perceived it was an illusion. That kind of stuff. He was fun to talk to, especially after a few pints. Conversation with him was always a heady mixture of philosophy, mysticism, and the beauty of art. In life, he once told me, you should go out there, teach lovers to teach love. Former students, sometimes much older than us, would sit down in the pub with him and talk about their lives. He was that kind of guy. I was so used to seeing him in the pub that he looked out of place in the mall. Oh, hi, Mr. Ryerson. We walked along the rail. It was late in the afternoon, and there was a table open and non-smoking. I poured him a coffee and asked what had brought him to the mall. Just doing some shopping, buying something for a friend. That he would be doing something so commonplace as shopping in the mall seemed out of character. I would have thought he spent his weekends meditating or contemplating the universe, perhaps painting in the nude. Well, I thought to myself, I guess he is like the rest of us after all. His friend was getting over a traumatic incident, he said. What happened? Well, if you promise to just keep this between us, I'll tell you. It's something that I think you might learn from. I looked up at the front. No one was coming in, no one was leaving. I had time. My friend was at an amusement park the other week. His nephew wanted to ride the roller coaster. He was wandering around when he saw a little girl about 9 or 10. She had lost her family in the crowd. He took her to the Lost and Found, had an announcement put over the loudspeakers, and even waited with her until her family came and got her. He felt pretty good about himself. His good deed for the day. I'm sure, I said. Well, he's in the car on the way home a little while later, taking his nephew back, and he suddenly sees these police cars and ambulances. There's been a bad accident on the road. And the girl was in one of those cars? Yeah, you're right. She died in the crash, and my friend felt awful. His good intentions had killed this girl. That's how he saw it. He had just wanted to help, but by doing that, her family left at the exact time that would put them in the path of a drunk driver. My friend is still overcome with guilt. That sounds just like the episode of an old TV show, I said. Mr. Ryerson shook his head and folded his arms. This is the truth. Wait, I remember this now. A Highway to Heaven. A guy dies and comes back to Earth as an angel. He has to help people so he can earn his way into heaven. He has a helper, a regular guy, and that happened in one episode, right? He helped a girl at an amusement park find her. No, that's not right. That's not it. I'm not lying. I wouldn't make this up. Mr. Ryerson! Mel came up to the table, interrupting us. I used to be in your art class. He looked from me to her, not sure who to respond to. It was great seeing you, I said, and I took my leave. A table and smoking was getting up to go. I went to the front to wait for them. Ah, Mr. Ryerson. Should I have said nothing? Maybe just let him talk? Was the moral of the story more important than its basis and truth? I wasn't sure. But I was beginning to suspect that another story, one that involved him wrestling a bear to save his girlfriend on a camping trip, might not have been gospel either. Part 12. Steve, what are you doing? Nothing. And that was the truth. It was the end of my shift, and I was at the front. I had just put in my food order into the computer, and I was breaking down a $20 bill. My own money. Nothing more. But there was a tone in Laurie's voice. A tone I had never heard before. Was it suspicion? Could I be hearing things? I told her the truth, that I was just making change, and I quickly finished up. Feeling a little uneasy, I went to the staff room to wait for my order. I hadn't been doing anything. Not that time. But that time was not every time. As I ate lunch, I had a minor epiphany. The others were talking about me. How had I been so blind? Over the years, I had listened to gossip on the floor and in the staff room. Everyone talked. Did Fran get high and come to work? Did Laurie have an eating disorder? Did Mel really sleep with 2 or 3 different guys every week? Everyone had their turn as the topic of the hour. I had just never considered myself part of the game. For the first time, I considered the possibility. Do you think Steve is taking money from the till? He's always at the front, isn't he? Plenty of opportunity. How else could he be saving up for Australia? He only makes minimum wage, plus his share of the tip out. Why else would he be satisfied working as a host for so long? Yeah, he must be dipping into the cash. Was I just imagining these things? Maybe. But that tone in Laurie's voice. On the walk home that day, I made a decision. I was done. The 2-for-1 scam had served its purpose. I'd saved a lot of money, over $4,000. It was time to stop. I could save the rest without help from the coupons anyway. I looked at everyone a little bit differently after that. Were they talking about me? There was no way of knowing, but I was taking no chances. No more time alone at the front if it wasn't necessary. Just hang out in the pass bar. Don't get accused of something you don't do anymore. This wouldn't make me a good person. That was a fact. I wasn't going to give the money back. Hell no. But I was not going to push my luck. Part 13. Max was gone. He hadn't lasted long. I heard through the grapevine that he had asked for an advance on his paycheck after a shift one day, and the boss had given him one. How much? Enough, apparently, to make it hurt when Max skipped his next shift and didn't answer the phone when the boss called. In the kitchen, things hadn't gone smoothly. He found it hard to remember all the orders during a rush, and the food didn't look good either. It had a sloppy, rushed appearance. There were more complaints than usual when he was in the kitchen. He even came in late a couple of times, prompting the boss to take him into the office after work and give him a warning. No one missed Max. The newer servers hadn't warmed to him in the short time that he had been back, and the ones who remembered him from the days of yore had been content to leave him alone. It was hard to say what Max had thought about everyone. He had kept himself to himself. After a week or two, it was like he had never come back at all. Part 14. A shift was a shift. Most passed without incident. Eaters came and went. I cleaned tables and took cash. Purgatory must be like this, I thought, more than once. When things were slow, my mind wandered. One evening, perhaps prompted by the weather, I found myself thinking about an old friend I used to hang out with in middle school. His name was Pat. In the autumn of grade 8, he often came over to my house to play video games. Other times we would ride our bikes to his house and hang out there. He lived near the top of a long, steep hill, and getting up there was a slog. Riding home, though, was legend. There weren't many houses that far up. Most of the area was undeveloped in those days. The few houses that had been built were fairly spread out. After sunset, streetlights lit up the road, but beyond the asphalt there was only underbrush and darkness. On cold evenings, I could see my breath when I left Pat's house to go home. I had no gloves, and the air, cold and damp, chilled my hands. It was time to ride. I got on my bike and pedaled to the end of the long driveway. There were no sidewalks this far from town. People's property ended at the street. People's property ended at the street. Riding home meant riding on the road. I turned my head and looked into the darkness. No cars. And then I was off. I picked up speed quickly. There was no need to pedal, but I wanted the thrill of going as fast as I could, the cold sting of the wind on my cheeks. It was exhilarating. I imagined I was racing from danger or towards some awaiting glory. My breathing and the spin of the bicycle tires were the only sounds in my ears. I approached an intersection. Was a car coming? I couldn't see. There was a house on the corner, but beyond that was darkness. I was going too fast to even consider stopping. My stomach tightened, and I tasted fear in my mouth as I entered the pool of light at the corner. Empty asphalt splayed out in 4 directions, and the intersection vanished behind me in a wink. More lay ahead. As I passed another house, I could hear a dog barking. I wondered who lived there. Were they my age? Did they go to my school? I could sense danger. It got stronger as my bike picked up speed. Houses became a blur in my peripheral vision. My cold hands gently squeezed the brakes for a moment to confirm what I already knew. I was going too fast to stop. Finally, the hill began to flatten out, and I could see the lights of a small corner store. It served as a landmark to separate Pat's neighborhood from the suburban sprawl that I called home. Some nights I went inside and bought a slice of pizza. The owner baked it fresh each day, and it was delicious. There was a small table near the window. I would sit down and devour it, warmth filling my stomach. The ride was almost over, and I found myself wishing it were longer. There was no speeding through intersections now. Cars came and went in all directions. I had to stop and wait. Houses and yards were smaller, with no spaces between them. There were sidewalks now, with people walking their dogs or talking to each other. Lights were everywhere. I rode down the rest of the hill carefully. Soon I was pedaling to the final corner. I could see my house. The lights were on, and I could hear sounds. Someone was watching TV. I locked my bike up in the backyard, my hands still freezing. The ride was over. I blinked. The lights in the mall were giving me a headache. The bell chimed softly. An old woman was standing alone at the front, waiting to be seated. "One for smoking," she said. "Not along the rail." I recognized her. She came in from time to time and always asked to sit around the corner in the back, where no one could see her smoke a cigarette. I picked up a menu, and she followed me to the back. Part 15. Laurie and Craig were getting married. It was not particularly surprising. They'd been together for 7 years. But it was an anomaly to see the transition. Everyone at the restaurant was already married, or dating, or single. I had never actually watched anyone take the plunge. I didn't think I would ever get married. Too much of a commitment. Besides, I had two fantasies that could never be reconciled. On the one hand, I hoped to meet my dream girl, someone who would excite me, appreciate the things that I liked, and understand me, really get me on an emotional level. Someone with common ground, but with her own interests and desires, some of which would clash with mine, but not too much. The yin to my yang. On the other hand, I fantasized about having a slew of girlfriends. Serial monogamy was a term that I had heard once or twice, probably from Mel. Date for a while, break up, find someone new, wash and repeat. I hadn't dated many girls, but I wanted to. The wedding and the reception were held at a hunting lodge on the outskirts of town, off a dirt road not far from where I used to ride my bike with my old friend Pat. Everyone was invited. Most of us had worked with Laurie for years. We knew Craig, too. We even knew a few of her friends that had worked on the floor as short-timers. Most servers went with their boyfriends or husband. Fran went alone, but then she and her husband seemed to lead separate lives. Whenever we had a staff party, she always went stag. I caught a ride with her and Amy and her husband. He and I got on well. We had made some small talk in the staff room 1,000,000 times over the years. The two of us smoked a joint in the woods. Amy gave him a look, but he shrugged and grinned sheepishly. Honey, at least I gave up smoking cigarettes. Norma was going with her husband, which raised a few eyebrows. Things weren't going well between them. They'd been on the rocks for some time. The staff room was like a confessional. We've tried everything, she told us one day before she started her shift. Romantic dinners, drives to the beach at night, flowers, perfume. Nothing works. I was hardly qualified to give advice, but I tried to think of something. What could help? Toys? Role play? I contemplated sharing my thoughts, but then Norma dropped the bomb. So I found someone. At work. This raised eyebrows all around. You're cheating on Eduardo with your boss? Really? You're sleeping with Sam Lowe? Mel added the faux Chinese accent that Norma always used when she made fun of her boss. No, she said, looking down as she flicked ashes into the ashtray. Don't make me sick. That bastard probably has the smallest dick in the world. No, he hired an accountant that comes around sometimes. He started paying attention to me. So I started paying attention to him. This came as a shock. I liked Eduardo. Always had a good conversation with him when he came to wait for Norma. She was banging the accountant? Really? Did he know? The wedding went off without a hitch. Everyone had a good time. Craig looked a little unnatural in his tuxedo, like a grizzly bear in coat and tails. You half expected him to tear it off and start roaring. But it all went well. Things started off on the right foot. Drinks and dancing followed. The DJ took requests. Someone asked for Macarena, and the dance floor was suddenly filled with people attempting to line dance. I had to get out. I stumbled outside. A few others were on the deck to escape the music, or have a smoke. The nights had cooled since the summer. The weather was crisp. A woman a bit older than me was leaning on the fence, smoking by herself. Buoyed by several bottles of courage, I sauntered over and struck up conversation. She said she was a friend of one of Laurie's friends. Really? What did she do? She had just started college and felt a little embarrassed about it. She was 27, but everyone in her classes was years younger. I think I kind of missed the boat, she said. Everyone I went to high school with has already graduated and started their careers. I was the one that stayed behind and just worked. Hello, where have you been all my life? Ah, forget them, I said. I read somewhere that our brains don't fully develop until we're about 30. That's when you really know yourself. Life begins at 30. You're just a baby. I did the math in my head. -3. Oh. You're not even born yet, I corrected myself. You got lots of time. You're early. Your friends probably spent 4 years studying before they even knew what they wanted. You're ahead of them. Now you know what you want and you're going for it. You're on the ball. She really seemed to like hearing that. She smiled. I moved closer. We looked out at the woods and the lights of suburbia far below us. My arm rubbed against her dress accidentally. I felt it. Now was the time. I tried to link one of my arms in hers, but she pulled away. You're sweet, she said, but I have a boyfriend. It was nice talking to you, though. She smiled again, gave me a hug, and went inside. Macarena had just finished. Now they were getting jiggy with it. Through the window, I could see Norma dancing with someone. It wasn't Eduardo. Part 16. Australia. When Sean first suggested it, I didn't really know anything about the place. Almost nothing about its history or politics. Just a few animals and bits of geography. Kangaroos, koalas, the opera house. That was about it. I went back to Jean's bookstore. She wasn't working, thankfully, and bought a travel guide. One place stood out. Cape Tribulation, a small piece of paradise almost 3,000 kilometers north of Sydney. I promised myself I would get there, somehow. This was going to be more than just a year abroad as a backpacker. It would get me out of the mall, yes, but that was just the start. It would be a catalyst for change. It had to be. Direction in life? This trip would point the way. Adventure? Self-discovery? Both were on the itinerary. Heaps of girls that couldn't keep their hands off me? That was the dream. One of the servers gave me a brochure for a student travel agency at her university. They ran a program that helped young people get working holiday visas. For most of the countries on the list, you had to be enrolled as a full-time student. But for Australia, all that was required was a pulse, some cash, and a completed application form. After work one particularly shitty Monday afternoon, I took a bus to the campus. After wandering around lost for a while, I found the student travel agency and picked up an application form. I felt one step closer. In fact, everything I did from that point on made me feel one step closer. When my application was approved, I felt like I had one foot already on the plane. I was doing it. I was really doing it. Each step was a milestone. I went back to the student travel agency to book my flight. The travel agent smiled when I told her that I was going down under for a year. She asked me when I was planning to go. Late February next year, I replied. She checked flight availability on the computer and told me the price for a return ticket. How much? I almost fell out of my chair. She repeated herself. The illusion that the travel agency had my best interests at heart because it was staffed with students was quickly dispelled. The agent's smile was malevolent. It touched her eyes. But that's too much. Well, Australia is very far away. Yeah, well, no shit. Still, I didn't want to spend half my savings on the plane ticket. I can book a room for you at a hostel in Coogee Beach. That's where the orientation seminar is held. They'll tell you all about opening a bank account, getting a tax file number, and some of our other services in this program, like budget flights within the country. Was she shitting me? She had to be. Had to be. Now, there must be a cheaper flight. This is a student travel agency, right? I mean, students don't have that much money, you know. There must be a better deal somewhere. The agent looked at me. There was that wolfish smile again. She looked back at the computer screen, tapped the keys for a while, and then said there was a cheaper option. I thanked her. So, here is the flight itinerary. First, you'll fly to LA, where you'll transfer to another flight for Taipei. The stopover there is just for refueling. Then you get back on and you fly to Kuala Lumpur in Malaysia. There's a 9-hour stopover there, but I might be able to get you a room at the hotel in the airport. Then you catch one more plane to Sydney. The geography went over my head. How long would all this take? It didn't matter. I didn't add up the hours. It was cheaper, and that did matter. The weather got colder, and November faded into December. There were rumors that the mall had plans. Big plans. It wasn't just smoking bylaws. A new mall for the new millennium, went the whispers. Laurie said that the whole restaurant would likely be demolished as part of the renovations. Having a restaurant without handicapped access was bad publicity for the mall. Times were changing. Where would everyone go? No one knew. The only thing for certain was that I wouldn't have a job waiting for me when I came back. This was it.